Okay, so recently, the Kanye West and Candace Owens broke the internet. They wore White Lives Matter sweatshirt, both of them, and this is gigantic. I know it seems like it shouldn't be a big deal, but it is. It's a huge deal. This is the culture war, and they wore
What's the bigger
white.
deal, though? Do you think it's them wearing that shirt, or is it Kanye's interview with Tucker?
Well, they're inextricably linked, but probably I guess wearing it because that's
Okay.
the thing that's garnered so much reaction. And we're going to include a ton of links about what's going on here, why he did it, Candace Owens angle, his subsequent interview with Tucker Carlson. We're going to include all of these links. If you're clicking on our stuff, probably you've seen a lot of this material already. But basically, he wore a White Lives Matter t shirt at a Paris fashion show for his brand, Yeezy. And, people reacted the way you think they react. People on the left thought he was being literally violent and racist, or now he's a, white mouthpiece or whatever stuff they always
God,
say.
the word literally has no meaning anymore. It's just
Yeah, that's literal violence. But anyway, he did it. And here's the interesting thing about it. For me personally, I had always viewed Kanye West as just sort of a provocateur. Like he's just doing this for attention and he knows what will push your buttons and he's just wearing something that will shock you and it's just for the brand and his brand is being such an iconoclast and being a rebel. I had thought this for a while, even during this period where he was really pro Trump. You remember that, right? He was wearing the hat. He visited Trump in the White House. But I had also viewed him as a very unstable, bipolar person. He's just kind of a crazy guy. But
had you
he's
seen any video interviews with him at this point?
plenty. And
Okay.
many of those made him seem pretty unhinged. Like he's just
Okay.
not a stable person. So that is what I thought about him. And I still think some of those things about him, but the big revelation for me is if you watch this Tucker Carlson interview, he's clearly either on some better meds or he's like in a better spot or something. He just seems like a rational human being. In fact, I thought it was a different person, by the way. I didn't know it was him.
Interesting.
I thought it was a different human being because usually he's just very animated in his interviews. He's just like jumping up on, well, not jumping up on tables, but he's a different type of person and he has
He
mental
looked
health
he,
issues.
he looked defeated almost in that interview, I would say.
I
He was
wouldn't say he
very
looked, yeah, he looked a little bit, but the thing is, he looked
maybe
rational and
stressed.
calm.
Stressed, maybe.
No, I would say he looked a lot more calm than he usually looks. And the way he
I guess
sounded was just like a normal human being.
yeah.
And I don't know how many interviews you've seen of him, but he does not ever come across as a normal human being. But
Well,
in this
okay.
interview, he
Low
did.
energy would be another word I would use.
Yeah, but that's normal for people to have low energy, right?
Right.
So anyway, the remarkable part about it for me is that I came to the conclusion that Kanye is not, or Ye, as he wants to be called now, he's not in this just for attention. He's not just trying to think, what's the one thing that I can do that will cause the most ruckus and make people talk about me? That's not the reason why he wore the White Lives Matter t-shirt or shirt. The reason why is because he is a man with conservative beliefs now. He believes in this. Like these are like his belief that Black Lives Matter is a sham of an organization and it's corrupt. That's just what he believes. His belief that, he's pro-life, he's just pro-life. You know, his belief that he's for Trump and, politicians like DeSantis. He said it in his interview himself. His conservative values just line up with those people. And so he was the most lucid and real that I've ever seen him. So I don't think it's just for attention. And I had never ever believed that before. And part of that was because I sort of bought into, and I know this is so odd because I don't trust the mainstream media. I don't think that they're telling the truth ever. And yet I still sort of bought into this narrative that they gave that, well, he's just crazy. And in fairness, he is bipolar. I think he was diagnosed as bipolar, so he still has some of those issues. But when you see him talking in a lucid manner like this and just saying, no, I have conservative values, I can only take him at his word. These are the reasons, these are his beliefs, and these are the reasons why he expresses certain beliefs. He's not just doing it for attention. And that's why I think it's so important that you have a tastemaker like this, a person who's so central to the culture, speaking in favor of conservative values. You never had that before. It's so rare, right? And they can't stop him. He's too big to stop him. So they can only say he's crazy. But if he does interviews like this, you can clearly see he's not crazy. He just has different opinions than a lot of the people trying to silence him. And I have different theories as to why. Like if you watch you watch the interviews, right?
Yeah.
So he brings up a couple of things. Number one, he still is a fan of Trump. He's a fan of DeSantis. He thinks that some of his handlers, like the Kushners, didn't do him any favors, and they're the real bad people. But he also talked about how, and he personalizes the experience for him because he, I think he became a father like maybe 8 years ago or whatever, and he had a strained relationship with his father, and it's clear from this interview that he blames his mother for having like a liberal stance, right? Like being just a liberal, empowered mom and keeping him away from his dad.
Not just his mother, though, right? It was more like his mother was getting basically brainwashed.
Brainwashed by, yeah, the powers that be, the state, the bureaucracy. She's just like
Yeah.
buying into this whole, oh, the nuclear family isn't that important.
Yeah.
God's not
Her
important, whatever.
mother, I feel like, is more of a victim.
Sure, sure. I mean, he wasn't like bad mouthing her or anything, but he did sort of blame that situation for his estrangement from his father. And here's what I think that happened with Kanye, and this will make sense. Like for people looking from the outside, it just looks like here's this rapper who had pretty liberal beliefs or whatever. Like remember, like in 2004, he said George Bush doesn't care about black people. He said that, so he was just sort of he was still towing the whole MSM
Hmm.
line, right? But when Trump was elected, he suddenly switched. He started wearing a red hat and just started talking about like tiger energy and all this crazy stuff. And people just then they just dismissed him as being crazy, right? But here's what I think
Yeah,
actually.
I wasn't following at that time, but
Oh well, he's
it's
basically suddenly said he's a Trump fan,
uh,
and he even visited Trump in the White House, and he said some crazy things then too. But he is bipolar, so I'm not going to say that he doesn't have mental issues. But in this interview, he's clearly on the right meds or something. He was clearly rational. What I believe happened, and I think this explains everything perfectly. When he finally he had those beliefs, right? He was raised by a single mother in this country, so he had sort of the typical leftist belief about everything. When he had children, it sort of flipped a switch. And when Trump was elected, like here's an example of a very masculine person winning. And also he had to be a father and he had to finally determine what it meant to be like a father. He had to sort of deal with that and grapple with how his relationship with his own father. He also found religion at the same time. So he just became a conservative person with conservative values. I know that sounds so freaking crazy. Like it seems like an obvious explanation, but it's people don't want to just explain it that way. They want to say he went crazy. I don't think that's it. I think he recognized a strong masculine presence in media. He recognized that he needed to be a strong masculine presence because he was a father. He recognized how society and feminism and the left and liberalism sort of damaged
I,
and estranged him from his own father. And he rebelled against all of this and created a worldview that fit with what he was observing, you know? And now he's just in that worldview. Now you can disagree with it. You can say, no, liberalism is not why he had a bad relationship with his dad. And Trump is not a great example of strong masculinity. You can say all of that. But I'm just saying this is how he views it. And so it makes sense. His behavior makes sense from that perspective. And that's just where he's at right now. And he divorced his wife, and his wife is steeped in these beliefs, and he doesn't agree with any of it. He has conservative values, like he doesn't want his kids on social media. He doesn't want his kids being sexualized and things like that. And he is just expressing all of those beliefs. And in the Tucker Carlson interview, he said something that was just so up, like you, I don't wouldn't. I would call it confrontational, but it's not really confrontational. It's just so um upfront and blunt. He just said,
Just calling the emperor naked, basically.
yeah, calling it like the part where he said, "Well, I wear a sonogram on my chest because I'm for life. I'm pro-life." There's so few people who would just say that just out loud, but he just says it
Mhm.
out loud. It's because he believes these things. That's it. It's not for attention. He just believes these things, and that is a 180 from where I was at. Uh, I still sort of just thought, oh yeah, he's just getting attention. Does he really believe these things? Who knows? Maybe. No, I really think he just believes these things now. So he's just a guy with conservative values who is speaking his beliefs. And the reason why this is so important is because he won't back down to all the people who tell him that he shouldn't. And he's very important culturally. He when he touches something, it's important culturally. When he says these are my shoes, people buy shoes. I own pairs of his shoes. I don't think you do, but I do. He's still a
Mhm.
tastemaker. He's still a important person in the culture. And when a person like that just stands up and says, "Well, I'm for religion. I'm for nuclear families. I'm for kids not being on social media. I'm for kids not being sexualized. I'm for pro-life." When a person like that says something, it's very, very troubling to the elites that are running this country right now because it's obvious that they don't want you to be saying stuff like that.
Well, it's also, I'm sure it's causing cognitive dissonance for a lot of these people. They're like, what?
Yeah,
But
and a lot of people, their cognitive dissonance causes them to just say, "Oh, dismiss him as saying he's crazy,"
yeah,
but he's not.
you mentioned you mentioned earlier that you think he kind of changed because you mentioned two things, kids and religion. But from the interview with Tucker, does it sound like his dad probably played a big role as well
No, I don't think so. I
in
think he
in kind of like red
I
pilling
think
him?
he reconnected with his dad recently.
Hmm.
So if you want to
Okay.
say he played a big role recently, yeah, sure. But I think his dad was not part of his life for a long time.
Okay.
And he talks about that. And he talks about how he bought a house next to his ex-wife, Kim Kardashian. And it was the way the media painted it was, "Oh, here's crazy Kanye, he's being a stalker or whatever." But the way he viewed it was when his mother moved him away from his father, it was difficult for his father to, because of where they moved or whatever his reasoning was, it was difficult for his father to maintain contact. And so he's just trying to be a better father and just like not let that happen in his situation. And yet here's the mainstream media painting him as a villain, right? Or as a crazy stalker.
Hmm.
And that probably has turned him against the media even more, you know? And so now he's just fully against them. And of course, if people want us to address, like, well, what about his core message about white lives matter and Black lives matter? He essentially said that Black Lives Matter is a scam, right? He wrote that message. He said it's a scam or whatever, a fraud. You're welcome. It's over, right? He wrote that, and of course, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. It's Black Lives Matter is not even talking about the amount of money they embezzled, right? That has gone into somebody's fancy house and not to any cause that helps anybody. Putting that aside entirely, we know, like, we can go, the internet doesn't forget. There are websites where you can see the mission statement of Black Lives Matter. It talks about Marxism. It talks about breaking down the nuclear family, right?
Yeah.
None of these things are good for black people. I would argue that none of these things are good for any people, but specifically for them, none of that is good. And yet you're donating to this organization that has literally stated that that is part of their mission statement. Now they've since deleted some of it, but the internet never forgets. And it's a scam. It's just totally a scam. So yeah, I'm happy that he's saying that. He's right to say it, right? And his explanation for why he wore the White Lives Matters t-shirt was that, yeah, of course they do,
Yeah.
right? And then there, of course, people would say, on the other side, people would say, yeah, but it's in response to this whole, they're trying to minimize the whole Black Lives Matter thing. So therefore it's racist. It's like, no, Black Lives Matter came from this organization, which is actively trying to destroy your community. So I don't think pushing back against that narrative and that organization is actually racist. I think it's actually good. They should push back against that.
I think it's a bit what's the word, like sobering to hear Kanye talk about how hard it is for him to talk, I guess. Because
Right, because he's such
it's
a
like,
rich,
okay, it's
important
like,
person, and he feels like he can't say
exactly,
what he wants to say. Like if he
exactly.
can't say
So it's
what he
like,
wants to say, then who can?
exactly. So it's like when you don't have money, you can't say anything because you have no influence. And when you have money, you still can't say anything, even if you have the amount of money that Kanye has,
Right,
because you still can't say anything because you're afraid, I guess, of losing your money or not being able to grow your wealth or whatever. It's
right.
like, but it's like if Kanye, this is kind of like we mentioned if Elon can't do anything, like we're screwed. Time to switch countries.
Right,
And it's
right.
same thing with Kanye. It's like if he can't say what's on his mind, who can? I mean,
And the sick irony of it is that yeah, Kanye is not all there. He does have some mental problems. He's been diagnosed as bipolar. He probably has to take some medication. But those are probably the reasons why you're even getting this content out of him. If he were just a regular person that didn't have these issues and wasn't bipolar, he would just be quiet or toe the company line, right? And he'd be like all these other celebrities that say stuff like, I support, current cause or whatever the
Mhm.
fuck celebrities
Yeah,
say, right? He would just be
yeah. I
one of
support
them,
the current thing.
right?
Yeah.
He would be one of them, and it's only because he has mental issues that he just says what he actually believes. That's the only
The
reason why you're
other,
getting this right now. And the only reason why it's important is because he's built up such a catalog of important cultural stuff. Like Kanye makes great music. I still listen to a lot of it to this day.
Mhm.
And even the people who have to get up and say, "Oh, I hate him" or whatever, when nobody's looking, they still listen to his music. You know why? It's really good. It's because it's really good music. That's why. Right? So culturally, you can't ignore him. You can't ignore him. And since he's a little bit crazy, he says what he wants to say. He says what he thinks. And so you have a person who is religious, is pro-life, is not uh, towing the leftist line in Hollywood. It's very, very dangerous to them because all the other rational actors, they've been cowed into submission because that's what a rational actor would do. They would look at the
Yeah,
they would look
that
at
makes
the
sense.
yeah, they would look at the cost benefit analysis and they would say, "Well, what can I get out of just saying what I actually think? Not much. And what can I get out of towing the line? A lot." So they all toe the
Yep,
line.
yep,
Even if they may have
yeah.
some conservative beliefs or whatever. But Kanye doesn't care because he's just not all there. But in this interview, he was definitely all there. I don't know if he was on the right meds or he's just in a different headspace, but it was so clear to me that this is just a person with conservative views.
So another thing that this interview highlighted for me, or underscored, I guess, is how how much we're not in a meritocracy and like free market, whatever. Like it's clear from his description of business, basically, how important connections and influence plays a role. Like talking about how I don't remember the specifics anymore, but basically just the potential of being canceled or not having yeah just if you don't if you don't have somebody on your side basically
Right.
that it's going to hinder your success. Yeah, so it doesn't. I guess I have the picture that of basically fair competition, right? And it's really it's just a lot of influence and marketing is what it feels like it boils down to.
Well,
Well, yeah, sometimes it's just like you said, maybe a lot of time, maybe still most of the time even, just the best stuff wins. But there's so much stuff out there which is winning just because of having the right connections and influence, I think.
right. Well, in his situation, the best stuff won because he has good music.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that they just, oh man, it just must be like It's like stuck in their craw because they cannot ignore that. They cannot ignore the quality of his art, you know? As much as they want to just dismiss him or marginalize him or erase him from the conversation, they just cannot. And he still has so much cachet with everyone. He puts out these shoes that are just like they cost $5 to make in China, and he charges $200 something for them, and they sell out because he has that cachet. They just cannot get rid of him. It's just he's a very inconvenient person for the left right now.
Mm. Yeah.
And the more lucid he sounds, the more of a problem he is because it's getting to the point where they're not going to be able to write him off as a crazy person, which is even a narrative that I bought into. But he's not just a crazy person. He's a person with different values, and he's expressing them. And I don't even agree with all those values. We're not super religious. He's super religious, but those are his values. It's way easier just to say this guy's crazy than to confront the fact that one of the most popular people and influential people totally disagrees with a narrative that you're trying to put forth.
Yeah. I mean, I think these interviews with Tucker are a must watch. I mean, he's giving you like a glimpse behind the curtain.
Yeah, and a glimpse behind the curtain about how it all works, like how his
Yeah.
wife is in with the Clintons and all that, right?
Yeah.
And we always try to well, not we, but I often try to just dismiss Kim Kardashian as this empty, vapid, BS, made up celebrity. But he reveals that she has close ties with the Clintons. So the reality is that whoever has influence, whoever is in the public eye, does have value, does have power. And of course, people in power want to either be in good or have some control over other people that have influence and power. So of course she would, right? And of course there's some apparatus that affects her. This is all just so much more intentional than people want to acknowledge. He talked about how his wife's friends and she knows the Clintons or whatever, and they all pressured him to be pro-vax or something.
Oh yeah.
Right? So there are people who are in control and want to control the narrative and want to control what you think. And their friends are all the other famous influential people, and they all talk and they all influence each other, and they pressure each other to, toe the line and whatnot. So what are you getting when you turn on the internet or you turn on the TV and somebody you respect or idolize or whatever is telling you, hey, you should be for this. Hey, you should be for that. You're getting something very manufactured. You're getting something very intentional. And he's kind of pulling the curtain back on that. It's not just spontaneous beliefs of all the people you follow. It's not spontaneous.
It's really unfortunate that the people that most need to watch this interview probably won't, because these are the people that I think an interview like this has a chance of making them just question some of the stuff that they've been fed by whatever mainstream media influencers.
You would think, you would hope, but no.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
So there was another part of the whole. So Kanye did his whole thing, and this editor from Vogue, or was it Vogue? I think it was Vogue. This fat woman from Vogue said, "Oh, this is literal violence." How the hell is it literal violence? He just wore a shirt that said something. But anyway, putting aside her utter stupidity, he, in response, posted a picture of her. She's a fat, ugly woman who's not well dressed. Okay, I'm just gonna put it out there, state it as it is. And he wrote, "This is not a fashion person." And then, to virtue signal, a bunch of people like Gigi Hadid or whatever, Justin Bieber, they came out in defense of her, and they said whatever about Kanye. He was being a bully or something. And then he responded in the Tucker Carlson interview. He said, why? They just did that because he just said the fucking quiet part out loud. And I always respect people who do that. They don't dance around it. And, because if I had a lot more to lose, if I was a famous person, I just have to admit, I would not say the quiet part out loud because I have to protect what I have.
Yeah.
I would just not say it because I want to protect what I have. I don't want to be
Up to a certain
ostracized or
point,
whatever.
though, I think maybe. Do you think would you still feel like that if you were, if you were like a billionaire? You think?
That's fair. If I was a billionaire, maybe I'd just figure like, well, they can't really hurt me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but as we know, when you make more money, you just feel the need to protect that level, right?
Yep. Yep.
You're just like, well, I want to make more than this, oh, whatever. But he just said the quiet part out loud. He just said, you guys, you only want to promote this woman because she's fat. And there's this agenda to promote fat people like fat is beautiful, fat is normal, fat is whatever. And that's demonic. He literally used the word demonic. I wouldn't use the word demonic because not religious, but that's what he said. And more Black Americans are dying from obesity than anything, from COVID, from angry white cops for sure, right? What's killing most Black Americans? Obesity. That's what's killing most of them. It's either that or abortion, right? If you
Yeah.
consider a fetus alive, right? So these two things are killing the most of them, and yet nobody wants to talk about it because it's just not what you're allowed to talk about. It's just not what the MSM says that this is. Oh, these are the acceptable talking points. Well, he ignores the acceptable talking points and he goes right into it. This woman is obese, and that's part of why he is criticizing her, clearly, right? And there's this weird apparatus set up now to celebrate this, to celebrate obesity, to, hail it as something awesome. It's damaging not only to his community, to the Black community, it's damaging to everybody, right? It's damaging to everybody. How many people die of heart disease and obesity related complications every year? I'm sure that number is greater than whatever thing that you think is important, right?
Yeah.
How much healthier would this country be if we just didn't celebrate this stuff?
How much more
Right.
beautiful would it be?
Yeah, and how much more beautiful. I didn't want to go there, but how much like the quality of life for people who have to look at other people, how much would it improve? Quite a bit. But just staying on the health angle, how much healthier would people be? And yet people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to accept that. They just want to just say, "Yeah, this is so awesome." And you know what? I'll I'll be honest. That woman did you see the picture posted over?
No, no, no. I didn't know any of this backstory really. Yeah.
She wasn't even dressed well, okay? Why is she an editor at Vogue? And also, how the hell can you complain about literal violence being committed against you when well, there's no
She's
violence committed
committing
against
quote
you.
literal violence on us, on our eyes.
Right. And there
To
is no
use their
violence.
terminology.
Right. She's fine. She's not bruised or bloody, right? All I can see is that she was paid by her magazine to fly to Paris and watch fashion shows. And then when she was at one of those fashion shows, she saw some words that she didn't agree with, and she called it literal violence. Like she was so incapable of dealing with some words that she did not agree with that she needed to label it violence. And you know why they do that, of course. They label it violence in order to censor it, in order to get rid of it, in order to make sure you can never use those words again. That's why they say that. It's very intentional. That's weak. That's pathetic. That's cowardly. You can't deal with those words. You don't have to agree with them. That's fine. But use your platform to say why you don't agree with them then. But when people call it violence, there's a very specific reason why they do that. It's to censor you. It's to make sure that you can't speak. If they called your words dumb or wrong-headed or illogical, if they called it those things, that'd be fine.
Mhm.
But that shows a willingness to engage with that idea and to debunk it or to push back against it. She has no willingness to engage with his ideas. None. She just wants to silence him, which, yes, I consider that cowardly. I consider that regressive. I consider that it's everything you would call it. Like, you just want to silence people, But that's what people do when they feel like they have power. Power corrupts, and people in power right now are the woke, right? The left.
Yeah, I'm really
And
getting
they've
to the
been
point
corrupted.
where, I just think of all these people as just they have no agency. They're just all robots. I mean, it's just Seriously, this Vogue editor.
Some of them are robots. You're right, but the ones that are not robots, it's even worse. The ones who are not robots are even worse, right? They know what they're doing. They want to silence. They want to stifle speech. That's what they want to do. If they're not robots, then they actually are actively engaged in this.
Who would you say is not a robot? Like Gavin Newsom?
I would say Gavin Newsom's not a robot. He knows what's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Yeah. Any like AOC, these people who are in the
I feel like
competitive losers
AOC
of
might be a
government.
robot, actually. You think she actually
Maybe,
knows what's
maybe,
going on? I don't know.
maybe.
Everybody should watch that
Everybody should watch
Tucker
it.
interview.
And here's the other funny thing about White Lives Matter. I looked at that and I thought, you know what? This would be an awesome Halloween costume. Right? It's so easy. You just wear a White Lives Matter t-shirt. It's so
You got to be careful, though.
it's so topical. But then, yeah, exactly. I was thinking, oh, but where will I go with this shirt on?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? And what conversations will I be forced to have?
And what? Yeah. You would have to basically avoid a certain crowd as well,
Right. And like,
or forever be
I just
I don't know
decided,
banned
I
or
just decided, oh, I shouldn't wear it. But then I thought, what if I wore, because Asians are always constantly being accused of being white adjacent. What if I wore a shirt that said white adjacent lives matter? Would anybody get? Here's the other thing. That would be a really cool thing, but here's what would happen. Number one, very few people will get what that even means.
yeah. They'll think that you're talking about white people.
Yeah, they'll just think it's a white lives matter shirt, right?
Yeah.
And then
They'll
I would
just-
have to
yeah.
explain it, and
Yeah.
because they're stupid, the explanation would go over their heads. It's just not worth it. It'd just be the same as a White Lives Matter shirt.
Wait, do you think for people who are listening that you should say what that means? Because
Oh,
maybe not
okay,
everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Asians are often accused of being, when it's convenient, Asians are accused of being white adjacent. Like if Asians want to get into Harvard or whatever, and you don't want to let them in, they're white adjacent because it's not convenient to consider Asians a minority, right?
Which basically means that Asians benefit from whatever advantages that white people have benefited from, I think. Is that
pretty much either because white people like Asians so much, or I don't know. The reasonings are many, but
yeah, it's just some bullshit basically they came up with so they can continue spewing whatever they want to spew.
essentially, and
Yeah.
pretending that Asians are not, because it's such an inconvenient thing, right? That Asians are non-white is very inconvenient for a lot of arguments out there.
Yeah.
Like the argument is like, well, non-white people have no chance to do X. Well, if Asians have done X, then that just totally torpedoes that argument. So you need to make the argument that Asians are white adjacent, whatever the hell that means. Right? Because it's inconvenient that Asians do anything. Like all the things that they do are super inconvenient to many of these arguments. So you need to come up with a reason for why it happens. And why it happens, they're white adjacent. That's not even an explanation. That's just two words together, but they put them together. So there it is. So people wouldn't get that. And I would have to explain that. And I don't want to spend my Halloween explaining to people what the hell it is I mean by that. Right? Even though I'm
maybe
totally in
you
the
could-
right.
Yeah.
But I don't want to explain it.
Maybe you could dress up as Kanye. I don't know what you would do to dress up as Kanye, but
He's wearing a White Lives Matter shirt.
yeah, exactly. You would probably just wear a White Lives Matter shirt.
How am I going to dress up as him? And put blackface on? Then that's a whole other can of worms, right? No, I cannot.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, I'm just Kanye. It's like, but do you like him? Do you agree with him? It's like, can you imagine if I went to a Halloween party and I almost want to do it just to prove my point. But if I went to a Halloween party, here's what would happen. I, an Asian male, would wear a costume inspired by what a black man was wearing, and it just said White Lives Matter on the back. Doesn't even necessarily mean I agree with him or whatever. I just thought it was a funny costume, right? I assure you that at some point,
Cultural appropriation.
I would be interrogated. No. At some
No.
point, I would be interrogated by a white person about how problematic it is that I, an Asian male, am wearing a costume based on what a black man wore, and it said White Lives Matter on the back, and how regressive or racist or whatever all the arguments that the left would make. We'd have to have that conversation, and I would have to take it seriously.
And you could also ask him where he got his gender studies degree from.
Yeah, or her. right?
Or her, sorry.
And we would have to have this conversation. I almost assure you that this would happen, that I would be interrogated by a white person about the how problematic it is that I'm wearing this thing. That's where we are in 2022. How did we get here? We need to ask ourselves how we got here.
Maybe this is also why I guess I find woke Asians so triggering because it's like you'd expect they're smart enough to see through this shit. Like you're Asian, you're supposed to be smart. How come you can't see through this?
They're smart when it comes to standardized tests, which is not real life necessarily. But yeah, I almost want to do it just to prove that that's what would happen. Right now, it doesn't carry much weight because you're just saying, oh, you're saying that's what would happen. There's no proof that it happened because it hasn't happened yet. But, oh my God. I almost assure you
because it
that
happens
it
all
would
the
happen.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be a black person that called me on it. It would be a white person. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It would be some woke white person saying, that's really offensive, that shirt you're wearing. Can you explain it? Yeah, I think it's funny. I think Kanye was right, and it's funny for me to wear. This is my costume. What's your problem? It's problematic for this and that reason. It's literal violence, whatever the fuck they're gonna say, right? Stuff that they read or stuff that they heard, and just totally ignoring the comical optics of them questioning me about it. This has happened before. I've had to explain my regressive views to freaking white people before. How? How? I'm not saying that, oh, because you're this race you can never question me because I'm that race. Like I'm not I don't believe that sort of thing. But you believe that sort of thing. You are of the ilk that believes that, well, your race is the first thing that matters and you need to check that and understand the context of everybody's race first. Like, but you didn't do that. You just blast it away as if I'm a fascist and you're super pure, smart, progressive person. You didn't check our races at the door, right? You didn't you didn't first check them to see whether or not you had the right to comment to me. You just did it.
Could you imagine, as an Asian, walking up to somebody wearing an Asian Lives Matter shirt and just being like, "Hey, you can't do this."
Yeah, it's just absurd, and that's why
It's totally absurd.
that's why I was thinking maybe I can wear a white adjacent Lives Matter, but then nobody would get that. They would just think it's
Yeah,
white
nobody
lives
would get
matter.
it. Yeah.
Fine. And I don't want to have this discussion on Halloween. I'm just trying to have fun. And I would have been drinking at this point. So I'm not going to do it. But you have to admit, it would have been a cool costume though. You wouldn't wear it because you don't go out for Halloween.
No, I don't.
When was the last time you went out?
Unlike Constance Wu, I have a very uninteresting life. I was thinking, man, this is what happens if all you do is play video games all day. Like you can't talk about your fuck buddies.
You don't even play video games. Stop lying.
I know.
You buy them and then they go on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah. This is all you do. All you do is watch YouTube videos all day.
I believe you've had a PlayStation 5 for like 2 years. You haven't played it, right?
No. Remember, I told you I did use that.
Oh, okay. What
Yeah.
did you play?
I've used it quite a bit. Borderlands 3.
Oh, okay.